So then we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find then the scripture used, the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the lineage of the Yitzhak, or the Yitzhayelic lineage. So then we understand a section of the son of Ibrahim as the second son, and we evaluate his objective of his completion then of the spring feast as we understand. Never claimed myself to have some sort of a revelation understanding in terms of beyond what the prophets of its Yitzhayelic lineage have already taught. Then we find ourselves then studying those events, so then we can learn more of the culture during the time of the completion of the spring feast, prior and after. So then, after evaluating some of the information, it's very interesting in studying the understanding of the column of salt regarding then the translation wrongly done by the translators of the time. And then we also understand they were manipulating the scripture in order to get their way on a situation regarding then the people. So then, studying what it meant, those columns of salt, we understand then the Roman legions, they used to get paid with salt rations. That's where you get then the column of salt. However, what was the main understanding of the spiritual world of the time? Caesar then was equivalent of, in quote, God of the taxes. So then when you begin to understand then the religious aspect of the people was then considered sacred in any kind of a level you think of. We don't know precisely what they believe and what not, but they had some sort of a value with religion. However, religion itself without taxes is dead. You have to have taxes in order for a government to function. Otherwise, it doesn't. So then, exploring this point, then we understand what then Rome was going through for quite some time. They had conquered then a vast land in many areas of the world, but then the problem was, because they were so far away, then sometimes some of those regions they would try to turn against the empire. So then, and the first indication of this factor back then was then when they would not pay taxes. So then you understand some of the scoundrelizations, for instance, the column of salt, we understand then were the rations paid. In other words, then tribute in exchange for taxes, obviously. If you don't have the money to pay the taxes, you pay with whatsoever resources of the land you have available. It's a form of taxes. The other section was then Cornelius, then guiding the soldiers and making sure the religion was under the control. So then we understand a section of it where there is this spiritual combat from then those who were understanding then the time of the end in terms of the transitional time. However, we understand also a lot of those people did not pay taxes. So then their religion was questionable if it was profitable or not. Then you find Cornelius was very involved with the time of the faith, but then taxes must be paid, or then governments can't function. Then any kind of a religion outside of paying taxes is not fit amongst the nations. So then where we get our example from? The example comes from the Mashiyach himself, when he was then set aside and placed among then the authorities of Rome during the time of the completion of the spring feast. He was then in the midst of a square over there where they try to trick him into some sort of a fault. Then the people of the law then say, should then we pay taxes to Caesar? And then the Mashiyach was in the presence of the authorities. If the Mashiyach would say no, then he would be put in jail, because he was then very influential with the religion. But then the Roman government was not very interested in religion. They were interested in people paying their taxes. They had a vast land they had to take care of. They had to take care of their armies. They had to take care of their horses. They had to take care of their people. They had to take care of then the soldiers. It was very costly. Then you had areas, many parts of the world, for instance, Northern Africa, you had parts sometimes far away from the mainland, sometimes islands. You have to kind of have a security over there, and then they have to pay tribute. So truly Rome was not interested in any kind of a religion of the time, more so because it was a tiny speck of land. If you compare, for instance, Israel, or the land of Israel, or then Jerusalem as a fact, comparing with the vast areas of the Roman Empire, it was a spit of land. They were not interested the least in their religion. But then the problem was, there was the movement of religion without paying taxes. Then we must evaluate what was then causing people not to pay taxes. Was only because Roman was pagan? Let me ask you this, what was not pagan back then? So it was a mere fact of opinion, but then taxes were not being paid. This was the problem. So then, evaluating from the religious viewpoint, there were many areas of the empire where then there were many religions. But then as long as those people were paying tribute to maintain then the empire, then the situation was under the control. But then when you find religions not paying taxes, then there is a problem. Because the first indication that comes, these people are hiding the tribute that should be paid for. This is the first indication. Sometimes the country owning the land, they don't understand in the spirit what goes on. But when those group of people, then they don't pay taxes, the first indication is these people are hiding what they should be paying for. And they go and they investigate. And when they do so, and then taxes are not paid, then the situation get ugly. So when the Mashiyach was then amongst the people, during the time of the spring feast, a very important time, those Roman leaders, they were not interested in religion. It was the very least of their problems. You can believe it 100%. They were not after the Mashiyach, they were not after the country. They want their taxes paid for. They had a lot of responsibilities with other countries, and those were very far away. And if you don't send then sometimes provisions to far away armies, then they die. Because sometimes if you trace on the map, a lot of areas are simply desolate. You have to have water, you have to have provisions, and then you have to have other people, the provisional then caravans, then to make sure those people are taken care of. However, if you do not have taxes coming in, how do you do it? So then those tiny skirmishes, those were the least. So then we begin to understand what went on during the time. There was a great deal of cheap, non-taxable paying religious people. The events themselves, they were not important. Because what you considered important in your religion is a spit for another religion. And so on and so forth. And Roman, during the time of their empire, they had thousands of religions, and they welcomed them as long as they were paying taxes. Then when you find in a movement going on, they think, well, they either found gold, they would found some sort of a tribute they should be paying for it, and they are not. So then they send the armies over there and find out what goes on. What is this? And then they speak with the authorities. Have you then paid your taxes? So that's why then the Mashiyach, when he showed up before the authorities of there of Rome, they were not interested in the religion. They were interested in finding out what was going on because people were not paying taxes. The problem was not the Mashiyach being the Mashiyach or not being the Mashiyach. It was not the point. The point was people were not paying taxes. If those people they were paying taxes on time, Caesar would not give a damn. If they want to make a movement, they can do the movement whatever they want as long as taxes are coming. As long as they don't try to take over the land and they pay their dues and they are not destroying their armies, heck with it. Let them have their fun. It's part of their religion. But the problem was they were not paying taxes. And then because of then the uproar going on involved with the religion, they want to find out why they were not paying taxes. The scripture does not describe it. Because when they translated, when they were recorded, we have only 10% of the recordings, and then only the religious aspect was recorded. But the reason was secular. People were not paying taxes. So much so then, and later the authorities, when they were speaking with Shaul, say, this guy has done nothing wrong. What is this? They were not interested in their religion. And even said if he had paid then a bit, he would get out of it. But then he wanted to visit with Caesar, because there was a plan with it. But as far as the people and the situation, they were not interested in religion. They were interested in people paying their taxes, because then they could make plans, or they could project their plans of maintaining then those areas of conquerings. So then we have created then an understanding of religious atmosphere and neglected a great deal the emphasis on paying taxes. It became a religious jargon mixed up of junk, and taxes were neglected. So then when we read the scripture from the viewpoint of the Romans, they didn't care. They were not interested. But the problem was, then later the movement became stronger and stronger, but they did not pay taxes. Because they thought themselves so important above taxes. Do you understand? Because they were involved with an understanding of the prophetic from the Yitzhayelic lineage, they considered themselves above paying taxes. Because they disregarded what the Mashiyach had said. Give to Caesar what belongs to him. Pay his taxes. And give God what belongs to him. Then you perform your religious duties then after you take care of your taxes. But then a lot of the world then got caught up in religion, and they neglect taxes because they thought themselves more important than taxes, but it's not. The very younger son of Ibrahim said, pay first your dues, pay your duties. So much so he said then Shimon, to catch a fish, he would get a coin out of its mouth. He was extremely concerned with paying taxes. Because the Mashiyach did understand, as long as then Rome then was receiving taxes from the nation, they were at peace. But the problem was they were not paying taxes. And then the relationship with the leaders of the law in Rome became then, what's the word, in quote, inflated with intrigues to postpone payment of taxes. Because the religious of the time, they thought at some point their God, the God of the people of the law, not the God of Rome, but the God of the religious authorities of the time, then their God would at some point intervene with the situation because they were trusting their God and they should not be paying taxes. Tax evasion. When then the very Creator said otherwise, you should pay Caesar what belongs to him. Do your duty, pay your taxes, then you perform your religious activity. That's why then you find then later the holy cities should be secluded, because then when they purchase a piece of land and they have over there then the holy city merely a camp with a tent on it and few other tents around, and they work the land, they pay taxes, then they are at peace. Because the understanding is, be secluded, however, pay your taxes. That's why the Mashiyach then gave the example. He was the tabernacle, we understand. But then they observe the Mashiyach as a person only, not a tabernacle. They don't understand the Mashiyach as the living tabernacle. What was his title when he first came? And he tabernacled. He is the tabernacle. But then later they were translating him as a person in the midst of waiting for God to do something. So then rather than understanding the Mashiyach as the living tabernacle, we have mistakenly having him as then a person in pursuit. But there is no pursuit. He is the tabernacle. From the viewpoint of the Romans, they were not interested. They want their taxes paid for on time. If they like religion, it's fine. That's why then the authority of Rome said later to Shaul, this guy has done nothing then deserving of death. And you have your own religion and your junk. You take care of yourselves. Don't bother us with this religion of yours. Where are the taxes? So this story of because Rome was evil and they destroyed the Mashiyach. Evil were then the people of the law. They were the tax evaders because they had perceived their God in a certain way. Sometime he would come and then restore the kingdom of Shlimon, where they would rule over Rome rather than vice versa. Tax evasion. It's not a prophetic understanding. It's not related with Scripture. It is tax evasion. That's how Rome described them. Liars and tax evaders. That's why the Mashiyach gave the example. First, pay your dues. Pay Caesar what belongs to him. Then, practice your religion. So then this facade of Rome being evil and then did not let them do their religion and did not let them practice their religion is junk. It's absolutely junk. So then later when the scriptures were then twisted around, then you understand why. People were not paying taxes. They were becoming numerous and numerous and numerous, more cities, more cities, more cities, more cities, more cities, but then they were not paying taxes. The Mashiyach gave the answer: if you pay taxes, then they are not going after you. So then, there is a reason why the cities were persecuted, besides then the understanding of giving directives. But the directives, when they are given, those are optional. However, when you mix taxes in the midst of it, and then people becoming more and more and more and more important because of it, where are the taxes? They are not paying taxes, because they consider themselves above than the law given of the land under Rome's leadership to pay taxes, and they were not paying. So then we understand why. Now we understand the mixing of the scripture with Rome's leadership of the time, because they were not paying taxes. The only reason why there was this mixture, because people were not paying taxes. We have scores and scores of evidence. Then the Romans saying, we are not interested in your religion. In terms of your laws, so on and so forth, you take care of yourselves. And they were then absolutely shoved out of the court, because they did not have time for junk. Why was the interest of then later mixing up the religion with then the rest of the scripture? Because people were not paying taxes. But then people, they got caught up in this atmosphere of religion without paying taxes. What is our country today, USA? It is an atmosphere of everything else other than paying taxes. We have scoundrels in the government, liars in the government. We have then people evading taxes. People have no sense of patriotism anymore. When they get a job, they steal what they get, whatsoever they can, as much as they can. They cheat an income tax and expect the nation to survive. And then God, because the time then is very evil, and then people don't understand the times and the seasons, where consciously people are not paying taxes. Precisely what they were doing during the time of the Mashiyach. So the situation with Constantine over there in the whole works, it's because people were not paying taxes. Then he had to intervene with the whole works, because then they were neglecting their taxes, and then there were armies on the other side of the empire waiting for provisions. And where would they get the provisions from? That's why the Mashiyach precisely said, give to Caesar first what belongs to him. Give me a coin. Whose coin is this? Whose face is this? The Caesar, huh? Give the taxes. Pay your dues. Pay your taxes. Then, only then, you practice your religion. You don't do reversed. People did reversed and then got in trouble. Read the order of the Mashiyach's experience. The religious leaders tried to get him, brought him before the authorities of Rome, and they asked the question to get him, said, should we pay taxes? What shows up in the situation? They were not paying taxes enough. We have to understand this point, otherwise we live in this atmosphere in our country where people are not obligated to pay taxes and our government goes to heck. In other words, then it's destroyed. It's true, it was an atmosphere of lying understandings that came from the twistings of the scripture, but people were not paying taxes. You couldn't maintain an empire so vast without taxes. So then we should give a slack to Rome and then not portray them as so evil. We should understand the times and the seasons of the Mashiyach's time, and he did describe what they should do. We have only 10% of the records. And since Rome was not interested during the time of the Mashiyach, so later, much later, was then during the time of Yohanan and on, when then the holy cities became very prominent. Yet people were not paying taxes. Taxes then were neglected. Can we find any reference of the autumn feast of paying taxes? No, it wasn't required because the Mashiyach already had spoke of it. He gave the example. What should you do then where you were at prior of exercising your religion? You should pay your dues. So don't think only because the Pope has stepped down from his position that the situation then is going to be a new situation. No. Truly, it's more work for the other side. Because not only they have to explain their lack of duty on paying taxes during the time of the Mashiyach. They were tax evaders. And then later caused then the mixing of the religion because people are not paying taxes. In terms of mixing religion with the Holy Scriptures, was it then legal from the viewpoint of the religious leaders? No. But during the time of armies around the empire then not receiving provisions, what do you think would be then the most feasible? So then we understand what went on. Stay tuned, much more coming up.